Check, check. Hello, welcome back, everyone. It is 1:31 p.m. We're going to continue our meeting here. And we are on item 6.7, 11:30 a.m. Consideration of an interim urgency ordinance imposing a temporary prohibition, moratorium, on the issuance of early activation permits for land use projects within the unincorporated area of the County of Lake. And either Supervisor Simon or Pyska, whoever wants to lead the conversation.
Go ahead and let Supervisor Pyska go ahead and start.
Sure, I'll start. Supervisor Simon and I have been working really closely over the past many weeks with Carol Hutchinson, Susan Parker, our special advisor, David Bosch, and really getting familiar with the important work that is happening in community development and why it's so critical to our county. And I really want to thank our council for taking the time to draft this urgency ordinance. We really conveyed to her what it is we wanted to accomplish, and I think she's done a really great job doing this and getting this documented for us. We have a lot of opportunities to improve our practices, and this is a really exciting time for us. But streamlining and modernizing our processes in CDD is going to make it easier for people to work with us. It will make the most efficient use of our staff time. It will enable the public we serve to know what they can expect and how long things will take. Improving our use permit process is the priority, especially during a severe drought emergency. Quality environmental review is a must for our board to make good land use decisions. We also need to ensure that the public has appropriate opportunities to weigh in on these projects. We want to be proactive in developing opportunities in our county, but sometimes you have to take a beat and reset. Early activation, for example, that can be the right approach in limited circumstances. But what we're looking to do right now is to find the right tools for each proposed project. Ultimately, streamlining the use permit process is our best opportunity right now, and pausing new early activations is going to help with that.
Thank you, Supervisor Pyska. Yeah, today the ordinance we're offering, if adopted, this ordinance would establish a temporary prohibition, also referred to as a moratorium, on the issues of the early activation permits and land use projects within the unincorporated areas of Lake County. It would enable our staff to address a significant backlog of applications for early activation permits and to ensure that permits are not issued without thorough consideration and criteria allowing early activation. And we know how many are out there right now. It will allow CDD time to study and assess and streamline approaches to the land use permitting process. All early activation applications submitted before the effective date of this ordinance and deemed acceptable will be allowed to proceed. There are a number of applications in various stages at this time, so for this purpose, those applications, date stamped prior to the adoption of this ordinance, will be deemed acceptable while still pending determined as complete. On behalf of our board's ad hoc committee, which was put together by the entire board to work on this committee with CDD, we recommend the adoption of this ordinance, and we appreciate the conversations we're going to have today to help us move this forward. I want to thank everybody for that time, and I want to thank Anita for helping us put this together and the entire committee. We've been working very closely to look how we can move forward and how we can do things to not only help this industry as we establish it and other businesses that come into the county, but also to make sure that, as Jessica pointed out, we're working on staff time and giving them the opportunity to really dive into these projects as they're coming forward. So I want to thank you for the time today, and that's our presentation at this point.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from board members on this topic? So I'm pulling up the ordinance, and I think this is going to be the question from many of the applicants. And I know that there's a paragraph, and the definition of deemed accepted means that an application for an early activation permit is deemed accepted for purposes of Section 3 herein when an application has been submitted to the Community Development Department prior to the effective date of this ordinance that meets all the requirements sections of 21-27.4 and, if applicable, Section 21-27.13 AT 21C of the Lake County Code. So my question is, in my understanding of the ordinance, it's two separate applications. One is an application for use permit and one is an application for early activation. They have to be connected. They can't be, you can't have an early activation without connecting it to a use permit. It says application twice. Application for an early activation permit has been deemed accepted. Herein, when an application has been submitted, is that the application of the use of the early activation, or is that the application of the use permit? I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
If I may,
Ms.
both,
Grant.
both of the sections cited go to early activation permits. The 27.4 has been in the ordinance for some time and allows for early activation permits for a number of things. The 21-27.13 AT2IC relates more specifically to cannabis, but in both circumstances, these are early activation permits.
And so I guess my confusion is, if it's been deemed accepted, would that be deemed accepted? You have an early activation already, or deemed accepted as in it's deemed complete, like you've given us all the materials we need?
This is a little bit lighter than that. What it's intended to mean, and certainly your board can change it, is that the application has been submitted and on its face it meets the requirements to be submitted.
Okay.
In other words, there's no grading. The requirements, in other words, there's an entry fee, if you will. You have to be able to say certain things will not be occurring in order to justify an early activation permit. And so what this says is that if you've submitted your application, rather than having it more involved, just having submitted to the Community Development Department and it meets the requirements for early activation under one or both of these code sections. For cannabis, it's 27.4 and 21-27. For other early activation permits, it would just be 27.4.
And I will try my best to flip to that part of the zoning ordinance real quick, but I don't remember in the early activation portion of the cannabis, commercial cannabis ordinance, that it says that your main use permit application has to be deemed complete. I just, because right now our problem is that people have been submitting both at the same time, rather than one, and then when meeting a certain milestone, then being able to provide the new application for early activation. In my opinion, I just want to make sure that the use permit application has been deemed complete, which would now make them eligible potentially to submit an early activation. If that's not deemed complete and they have an EA at the same time, that's where it gets, I think that's where staff has been confused too, is getting both applications at the same time rather than having.
Because see, the early activation permit is actually just a temporary 6-month permit intended to stand alone, was intended to just be kind of a respite while other things were gelling and coming together. And now it's become kind of an entitlement, or treated as an entitlement, which is a temporary permit it wasn't intended to be. And having the early activation and the use permit going together kind of confuses the entire issue, because if you can fast track the minor use permits and major use permits rather than spending time on a temporary permit, people get their actual permit that much faster. Right now, the whole process seems bogged down because people are trying to do more than one thing at the same time. But again, if there's words that you feel are more effective here, the point was that if you've put an application in for an early activation permit and it qualifies to be an early activation permit just on its face, and if you want to change that and just say it's been submitted to the Community Development Department without even looking at the requirements, you can certainly do that. But it's just the early activation permit that needs to be, again, according to the direction of the committee, needs to be put on pause for a minute in order for the process to become more streamlined and clear.
And let me clarify my comment, because I have a feeling my statement was not maybe clear, and I just popped up the early activation portion on 27-129, page 120, I guess it would be 129 that I'm looking at, where it says for early activation for cannabis, it says the applicant shall have filed an application for a minor or major use permit application as appropriate for the same project that has been determined to be complete. And that's what I was looking for, is
I see,
making sure
okay.
that the main application has been deemed complete, because unfortunately the status quo has been you submit both at the same time. And I didn't want those situations to be wide open for saying we can continue. I wanted to make sure the main use permit application has been deemed complete by CDD, and therefore then we can look at the early activation that has been submitted as well.
And as long as it's a condition of one of those two sections, then yes, it would have to be
Yeah.
met. So my apologies for misunderstanding.
Yeah, no, I probably put
It's
way
just
more
that-
words in there than I
Well,
should have.
no, it's, again, the processes have become a little convoluted, and the point is that if that is creating a backlog, the easiest way to do that is to not circumvent the work of anybody who's already in the system, but as to future ones, to just say pause, and I believe that's what the committee is recommending, to just say pause to make sure that this process can be as clear and streamlined as possible.
And I think that this follows the same pathway of our previous conversation, where this is not just how it's going to be. There's going to be further conversations to review how these things have been done, what needs to be rectified, and bring it back. But I would also suggest that this falls right in line with the drought situation, that an early activation, which is not the entire deep dive of the environmental impact analysis, really should be something that we look at, and it should be a rare case at this moment in time due to the drought, that early activations are as easily provided. And granted, last year with 100 early activations, or approximately 100, versus this year where I think we're not even hitting 20, it's drastically different, but at the same time still should be scrutinized for the environmental impact. So I appreciate the committee bringing this to me. That was my only question, was for the clarification of where people are in the application process and who gets cut off and who does not.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just one further
Please.
clarification. This ordinance itself is in effect for only 45 days. And within that 45-day period, your board can consider whether you want to have a notice public hearing and have it extended further. And you can certainly do so. If you take no action and 45 days passes, the ordinance dies.
Thank you for that clarification, Anita. And ultimately, as you were saying, more discussion needs to happen. And with the committee conversations that we've been having, we really think that this is just another tool to help us move forward with clarifying, and really, as County Council said, just getting clarification on the easy application process. We want to move towards the major and minor use, approvals of those permits. That's the ultimate goal, so we have stability for the industry, but we also look at the opportunity to have our communities weigh in. As you know, we've sat here right at this board, and that's one of the big things that are happening, and I think we'll be able to accomplish that with our early activation moratorium ordinance that we brought today, and hopefully we can have some good discussion, but looking for support of this ordinance.
Thank you. Any other comment from board members before we open this up for the public? All right, let's go ahead and open it up for the public. Anybody in the board chambers have a comment on this?
Hi, my name is Mike Mitzel. So the two different ways you're looking at it, like if you're deemed complete or if you've turned in your application, is going to be a way different number. We have projects that have been turned in for months, sent out for RFRs, and we haven't received a complete, like a deemed complete letter. So I'd like to know how many are deemed complete right now, because I don't think it's a lot. And if you were to do it like she was saying originally, where it was, if you had just turned in your permit, that's going to cover so many more people than the deemed complete way. I know we've had projects that have been sent out for RFRs, like all the requirements to be deemed complete have been met, but they're just never sending out the deemed complete letter. And it's part of like meeting their Streamline Act or whatever. They don't want to tell you your project's complete and then take as long as it takes to get through the rest of the process. But it's just going to affect a lot more people if you do it that way. I think I get what you guys are doing with this. I think it probably should have more public comment and really look at it. It's early activation is like, I get where it has the environmental impact, but it also gives the neighbors and everyone a chance to actually look at the impacts of the grow, and it's not all just speculatory. It's like you can do the grow for one season and see if there really is an impact to the environment or to neighboring wells or to traffic, and without it, all the neighbors are just kind of complaining about what might happen. I mean, I would personally like to see every project go through a year of early activation before they get a 10-year permit. In reality, that's probably a better way to actually judge if the project has an impact on the environment, and then you don't give them the 10-year permit. As right now, if there is no early activation, nobody really knows what the project is going to do. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think, just talk about, the conversation as we move forward. This ordinance here, obviously, with the early activation and the moratorium, as we said, we've got work to do to look at all of the impacts that would be brought in by these, both the sequel, we talked about the hydrology reports, all of those things that we're going to be talking about as we move forward. It's just streamlining and updating the process so we can make sure that we have a thorough analysis of how these projects are going to fit into the community. So I do hear you a little bit on that, making sure we're trying to, I think when we drafted this, our intention was to capture as many as possible in that conversation of the folks that have the permits in the line right now. And, we tried to really say that in the language we put together. So we'll look to try and move forward cautiously, but I think this is the way to go to help us really get the analysis as we need as we put these projects into our communities.
Mr. Chair, I would just say too that CEQA won't allow you to test it out to see if there are impacts to the environment. So that isn't actually an option.
No, and I think that testing it during a declared emergency is also, we need to take precaution in what we are saying yes to and not yes to. Let's continue with public comment. Is there anybody else in the board chambers?
Don Van Pelt. I have firsthand experienced this early activation as recently as the last 3 months. And I think the board really needs to look at the long-term outlook of things. There's numerous issues involved that we can say today that everything's going to be fine, but nobody really knows. And, with the Planning Commission last week of one of the largest, if not the largest, cannabis grow in California, there's several issues involved that really need to be looked at. And water is the main issue in the drought, but also we have numerous other issues, odor and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I live right next door to it personally. And earlier today with the COVID, there was a gal that spoke about savoring the air. And then the doctor spoke about it. So how am I going to savor my air, or the valley air, when nobody knows what the outcome's going to be? And the prior gentleman letting them get going and see what happens so we can all measure it and see what's going to happen, I think is a very good idea if you're going to allow this type of thing to go on, because there nowhere is addressed odor, and water is very little addressed. So we really need to understand what the long-term consequences are going to be for this type in Lake County. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to reference you to the current ordinance that we have, there is an odor mitigation plan There is a way to go and file complaints if there are odor issues. And there is a water use area, which includes an annual report to CDD on well reports and well use. And we just strengthened that a little bit today and looking to continue and further that with more scrutiny a little bit later once we get more deep dive into the conversation. Just wanted to make sure you were aware that those things are there.
The odor issue is for indoor. This is outdoor.
I think the odor issue, as far as I'm concerned, is for any and all
Right,
grows.
but the mitigated measures right now are only for indoor. There is no mitigation measures for outdoor, to the best of my knowledge.
And I think that there's still room for filing a complaint. I think it's the complaints would go to the air district, and the districting that we did was also part of the mitigation process as well, to make sure that it wasn't in zones that it should not be. Appreciate the comments, though. I do. Any further comments from the board, or from the chamber? Let's go ahead and open it up to the Zoom room. Sean Connell.
Thank you, Chair and Board. This is Sean Connell. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I might have caught the back end of the open conversation between the board and I believe County Council. I'm looking at the Planning Department application right now, and early activation is a portion, a $190 fee portion of a total use permit application. So I yet again find myself trying to understand why we're pulling apart a portion of the total application, which would mean that any applicant in the process isn't deemed complete or eligible for early activation if their entire project hasn't been reviewed. This was a portion, and I think it's already been explained, that this was used as a stopgap, knowing that the time for review and the amount of people that would need to go before Planning Commission and scheduling agendas and things of that nature, this would give people the opportunity to remain in business and to be successful here in Lake County. And yet again, we're stripping away that right in a time that we are all trying to recover from a pandemic that is still ongoing. There's not a lot of outlook here in Lake County as far as jobs, as far as really any economic growth outside of farming practices. That's total agriculture, both throughout Upper Big Valley, Scotts Valley, Kelseyville. That is what this county depends on. I've sat before this board multiple times. I've spoken about cannabis. I was the previous cannabis manager for Mendocino County. I fully understand both the regulatory and the farming plight that stands before us. I think what the best thing Lake County could do at this moment in time is to figure out how to establish a cannabis department. You've restricted wells based on use permit applications, which we all know is a way of saying that cannabis permits, because agricultural wells do not go through the Community Development Department for approval nor scrutiny, so the amount of ag wells that draw from this county is unknown. I know that last week, University of Berkeley's Cannabis Research Center put out an entire publication in Mendocino County detailing the use of water of Northern California farms based on research and data that's provided from accurate farmers to their water boards. That is a requirement of their license both locally and at the state level. We are talking about the most regulated industry before us, and we're still fishing around and trying to figure our way through it. I think it's time that you invest into it. I think you just establish a department. I think that you don't have a representation from CDD here talking about the difference between those permits. I imagine that's my time, but I would love to see a department here in this county that focuses and gives us the ability to have subject matter experts that know what's going on locally in our county. And that would be the biggest support both in those chambers, outside of those chambers, and throughout the county and region. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your efforts. And I look forward to talking to you. Have a great day.
Ms. Grant?
Just for clarification, the early activation is not a right. It's also not a portion of something. It's an independent permit. And the requirement is that they shall have filed a major or minor use permit determined to be complete. So it doesn't stop that process. And again, and certainly both Supervisors Simon and Pyska can speak to this since they're integral to the committee. But the point is that the early activation seems to be creating a backlog, seems to be creating confusion. The point of at least this initial 45 days is to give the department and this committee the opportunity to review and determine whether you want to do a separate division, department, bureau, etc. Those things are all up to you. But this is just providing a pause so that you can look at those things with the help of the people in community development. And then if you decide to extend it, as Supervisor Simon said, with a great deal of feedback from the public as you move forward.
Thank you for your comments. Any further?
Anita said that correctly. You know, what we're looking to do, as we said once again, is pause this at this time and then bring it back. When we do at the end of the 45 days, as Anita said, County Council, you know, if we're going to extend this, there will be a public hearing and we'll be bringing more information and more conversation along that line. So it's been stated, you know, I will just talk about my intentions in this. As a board member, when I voted for early activation, when we were doing it, it would be something temporary, and now it seems to be turning into something that, you know, that's the mode everybody's going into, early activation. So I think at this point, we're learning as we go. I said that for the first 5 years, that's what's going to be happening with this industry. And as we establish it, these things, you know, we're going to have to take these steps. So that's where I'm at right now.
Anything to add, Supervisor Pyska?
I'll just add that this is only going to affect the new permits. Anybody in the pipeline, you know, it shouldn't affect. And, you know, we are in the summer growing season right now. We are in a drought. And so this is the appropriate time to make this pause.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on with public comment.
I think, do you have another comment?
And let's go with Mary Jane Montana.
Good afternoon, Board. Thank you for this discussion. As some of you may or may not know, early activation has always been a part of our zoning ordinance for many, many years, not just related to cannabis. That there would be use permit applications that portions of the application could be started without any building permits, without any grading permits, that sort of thing. For instance, somebody that was going to convert a building and didn't have to do any interior or construction work could go ahead and open up while they were waiting for the use permit process to carry on. And then we looked at that in the zoning ordinance regarding cannabis, and same sort of thing. There was quite a backlog from the very beginning that people were waiting a long time to get their permits reviewed and get the okay, get the modifications, that sort of thing. And then somebody said, well, if it's something that doesn't require grading or building, so that these are restricted to those projects that don't require any permits, would not require any permits other than the use permit for the cannabis cultivation. Wouldn't allow grading, so they'd have to cultivate either in pots or raised beds. Wouldn't allow a building, they wouldn't be in greenhouses, that sort of thing. So not everything qualifies for early activation anyway. I would ask that the board and this committee consider during this 45-day period of time to look at things, to continue to allow early activation for a minimal amount, whether it be 1 acre, 2 acres, 5 acres on some of the larger grows, of outdoor only, again with the no permits, to allow people to begin the process to recoup some of their financial outlay. There are folks that have considerable financial outlay, both in terms of the purchase of the land, the taxes, those sort of things. So if you would allow it for 1 acre, 2 acres, 5 acres, something like that, that would allow them to go forward to some degree with minimal impacts to the environment, minimal impacts to existing activities, while still being able to perhaps continue and recap some of their financial outlay. something for your consideration during this 45-day review period. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next, Trey Sherrill.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to comment on the deemed accepted definition in this urgency ordinance. I'm not sure how this would affect, in response to COVID, the Community Development Department started requiring that applications were submitted through the cannabis file share or file transfer website. Many applications have been submitted in the last few months. The Community Development Department has acknowledged that they have received those applications. However, they have not assigned those applications a use permit number or an invoice to pay the associated application fee. It's my fear that those applications would not be considered deemed accepted at this point in time, yet they've been received by the Community Development Department for some of them as many as 3 or 4 months now. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jennifer Smith.
Hi, this is Jennifer Smith. I'm concerned because early activation is unique to cannabis projects, but today's conversation seems pointed solely at cannabis. Projects that are being held up in CDD are actually cannabis versus other projects, which legal cannabis division. I understand that you're going to take these 45 days to review the process and review CDD, and I do hope that that is one of the outcomes, is that we have a dedicated cannabis team that understands this process to give a consistent process. But I do feel like this is a little bit of selective enforcement through this process, and that's on my ignorance. I don't know that, but I do. The theory behind this, it just feels like with now adding water hydrology, and there's just a lot of stops and starts, and I hope that we take this 45 days because I'm sure this is going to move forward, but let's take this time and get a consistent, streamlined process to this so an industry and a sustainable industry can be built. And this isn't just cultivation we're talking about. This is, manufacturing and processing, and these are jobs. These are jobs in the community that need to be fostered, and I hope that you'll consider some of those comments. Thanks.
And I will add a clarification that this ordinance, urgency ordinance, is looking at the entirety of early activation. It does speak to the early activation in cannabis, but it covers all early activation, not just cannabis. And I'll let Ms. Grant correct me if I'm incorrect on that statement.
Thank you.
No, sir, that's absolutely correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Daniel Terrell.
Good afternoon. I think I'd like to piggyback off of Mary Jane Montana's comments. I think that the ordinance, especially like early activation, has a lot to do with small farmers. And I think that's who is directly impacted by this. So I think this will pass. But I think moving forward during those 45 days that small farmers are taken into consideration. Larger corporations that are coming in and whether it's wineries or cannabis or whatever it might be, they can afford to wait. It's part of their bottom line. Small farmers don't have that opportunity. They don't have the resources. And so what this does, at least in cannabis terms, it pushes people back out into the fringes and back out into unregulated markets. And, you won't see the same kind of movement towards permitted and regulated growing. You'll start to see more unpermitted grows on the outskirts of different areas. And that just presents a different problem for a different agency. And I would like for the board to really consider that going forward for the next 45 days. Like I said, I think it'll pass. Thank you. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I see a hand here from Brenna Sullivan.
Thank you. Brenna Sullivan, Lake County Farm Bureau. As it was pointed out before, early activation is a process that's not specific to cannabis, but it has become the standard on nearly all of the new cannabis projects. And the difference in cannabis is that some of the impacts that the major use permit process was put in place to originally address, those are still being experienced on the landscape and by the neighbors in early activation cannabis permits. And since 2016, there have been a myriad of problems that have arisen from these projects that have already set the precedent on the land. So when you go back in and try to address some of the issues that have come up in fixing some of the processes or tightening up some of the ordinance language, we have this gap in people that have already been early activated, and we have to, then you have to create a Band-Aid to address those projects that are already partially through the process. So we agree that the process does deserve a thorough review. In 2016, it was created as, in my understanding, as a temporary process to bridge the gap between people that were already operating under the previous set of laws and regulations to bring them into compliance with the commercial cannabis ordinance. And, it's been transitioned to be a stopgap with the long waiting process, but it has created a number of other unintentional issues that deserve that thorough review at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I see no more hands up in the Zoom room. Just gonna go back real quick to make sure we get all public comment. Is there any additional comments from the chamber or the Zoom room? Okay, I see one hand pop up. Damian Ramirez.
Hello, Damian Ramirez here, Lake County Grown. I just want to encourage the board to review some of the definitions that some of the previous speakers have spoken about. I think in the past, lack of clarity and on some of these items and differing interpretations by CDD have created some issues in the past. So really dialing in what some of these phrases and words really mean, I think will be beneficial for everyone involved. When it comes to water usage, I really hope that enforcement of illegal grows can be stepped up the remainder of this summer and fall, as that would be major to help regulate illegal water usage. I think that is a major problem as well. And again, as previously mentioned by a couple other speakers, following the 45 days, it'd really be amazing to have some sort of a dedicated department to exclusively deal with cannabis, as I know the early activations cover a lot of different projects, but as we all know, it's primarily getting centered towards cannabis and those sort of projects. So thank you very much, as always.
Thank you for the comment. All right, last call for comments from the public before we bring it back to the board. We have a comment in the board chambers. I will go ahead and close public comment in the Zoom room at this moment.
Hi, what? Okay, hello.
Try again.
Okay, there we go. Hi, Tony Morris again. I think when they're talking, complaining about the business and the money that they're going to lose, that they didn't have a very good business profile if they jumped into this and weren't prepared for something like a drought or something like that. I've been self-employed for 40 years. It hasn't always been the best 40 years because I didn't plan well for it, but it doesn't mean you're entitled to take a business for profit and use water that might be needed for the community just because you want to. So I think that the board wants to pause and take a look at this, and I think it's a great idea to look at some of the things that we talked about, that I heard talked about earlier. One of them is fire suppression in the areas that these places are going. I haven't heard anything about that, or whether that's part of the program or not, and some of these things need to be added in to their permits and stuff. You don't have a right to have the permit because you paid the fees to submit the permit. And I know the grow that's going on out in the Oaks, it seems to be one of the ones that was pushed through, and now it seems to have all kinds of problems, even though they say, well, we're a legal grow. They're not a legal grow. They have a temporary use permit to develop that project, but there's problems that don't meet the criteria for the codes. And so does that mean they get to keep going anyway? It shouldn't. So, I mean, that was the whole point of setting up these laws. So if the laws aren't clear and they aren't working well, then we probably need to revise them and make them more firm. And like the other guy was saying, have a better definition of some of the language too. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment as a whole and bring it back to the board. Any comments or questions from the board? Supervisor Pyska?
I hear everyone's comments. I just want to reiterate, we're doing this to improve the processes, to improve efficiencies, to improve expectations and deliveries. So this is to make the process better and stronger. And as I mentioned before, being in the middle of a growing season, it's the right time to do it. So I understand that there's some concern, but you know, it's our plan to make this process better and stronger. And I hope that everyone can just bear with us as we get through this short-term process and get to the other side. We will be having conversations. You know, we will be taking input, but this is the time to really make the improvements that we so desperately need.
Thank you for your comments. Anything further?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of talk about the Cannabis Department, and I know, I want to say in the 2019 budget approval, we discussed trying to initiate the Cannabis Department in the Community Development Department, and since then we've been able to hire a code officer and a tech and one planner for cannabis. However, we've never been able to obtain a program manager, and so I hear a lot from folks that are on the calls talking about program managers, and we need qualified program managers. And so a lot of these folks have expertise. You know, maybe that could help if someone with the expertise applies, because it's been open for a while, I'm pretty sure. I just wanted to highlight that because I keep hearing it, you know. So.
And if I can clarify, I think qualification needs to come with the expertise and not just the experience of having submitted an application and followed the process. I think the difficult task is that we need to make sure that you have the qualifications that come along with it.
Right.
But I know that, yes, I agree that it's something that we have been working on, and unfortunately have not been able to fulfill.
Well, I can respond to that. That is part of the committee's work, and I can assure you that is something that we are working very diligently on right now.
Yeah.
Right, but the frustration from the public is real. We've been trying to do this over the course of a year and a half, and we just have not been able to fulfill those items, even though they have been budgeted for and allocated.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. So we got more work to do as the board, as always, you know, to help fill those positions. But ultimately, as Jessica said, and the rest of the committee, you know, we're looking at the streamlining the process, giving a better opportunity here. And this is just one of the steps that we need to take. And we're looking at all options, whether it's an individual or whether we're contracting out. All those conversations will be happening. And as the committee, we appreciate the opportunity to work on that. And we'll be returning with those with the help of everybody on the committee and community development. So that is the plan.
Right. So I do want to bring up a point that was brought up by Mary Jane Montana. So right now we have a line in the sand. If you have an application, a use permit application that is deemed complete, and your early activation application has been deemed accepted, trying to use the definitions and the wording that's inside our, both the urgency ordinance and the cannabis ordinance that we have in place, then you are still eligible to obtain an early activation permit. I don't know what that number looks like. Do we have an idea of what that number looks like, of how many applications still fill that? Wondering if anyone might have that data.
I don't have that data at this point.
And I know that the data itself for our cannabis applications is being dissected and reviewed and kind of cleaned up for what we need to know and better understand what our position is. And the reason I bring it up is there are some very large grows that are still looking to get early activations. And I personally like the idea of both, not the idea of testing, because I think that's the wrong word to use and the wrong direction, but the idea that a maximum amount of farming for an early activation versus you can do your full use permit, because then at that point we're basically saying here's a year's for free of the use permit. I know that she mentioned 1 acre, 5 acres, something along those lines, with the idea that, and I know that the main purpose behind this is for the cleaning up of our processes and our efficiency issues that we've had in community development. We need to stop overwhelming our staff with so much, and we want to make things easier, not just on the applicant side, but on the staff side as well. I see it more as an issue of drought as well. And so I think it would be easier to swallow from the public's perspective if we were looking at a minimal amount for an early activation. And again, without knowing the numbers, it makes it really difficult to know if we're passing this and 0 meet it, or if we're passing this and 30 meet this. And again, what do those 30 look like? So that those details.
I can't answer your question for community development. They would have to answer that. What I can say is that this doesn't, if you make an application for an early activation permit right now, one of the requirements, if it's a cannabis project, is that the department has determined that your use permit application is complete. Mm-hmm. So if it's not complete, you don't qualify for an early activation in any event, whether it's in the pipeline or not. The point of this, I believe, is that the committee wanted to be fair to people who had done everything they were supposed to do and put in their application. So if somebody put in an application but their use permit isn't deemed complete, then perhaps what your board might want to do is, over the course of the 45 days, direct staff to look at these issues, because you can adjust the ordinance accordingly if you decide to extend it. This is not etched in stone for you, but that would be one of the things that you could consider. You could direct staff to look at the issue of where they are, and if the deemed complete is circumstance or is because of a circumstance that's not the fault of the applicant, then your board can certainly consider that in any adjustments you want to make if you determine to extend the ordinance beyond the 45 days.
And I'm not trying to change the definitions. That to me needs to be set in stone, or else it becomes even more confusing than it already is. My concern is, if it's 0 applications that meet the guidelines, then let's speak very frankly and say we're doing a moratorium on early activation, not moratorium on early activation if. And if we don't know if that number is 0, then we're not being very transparent about what we're trying to do. And if the number is greater than 0, then I think that those that are still eligible to get an early activation should be potentially, because it's still discretionary and it still needs to pass the rest of the test of the early activation process, not have the ability to do 100 acres on an early activation. And I think right now it's still discretionary, and I would love to say for early activations that are still eligible that you have a maximum limit of this much that you can do. That way we limit the impact, if it's approved, on water use and other things like that. Right now, I don't know what's still eligible, and I know that there's some pretty major grows that are still waiting to see if they're going to get approved or not approved for early activation. And if a large grow is approved, we're going to hear about it. And so,
Well, you know, when we started this, there is no silver bullet. We got a million things moving on in different directions. I know that in some of the larger projects and other things, we just passed an ordinance on our previous item that is also going to change that analysis as we move forward. So, you know, I think as County Council said, what we're looking for today is to move forward with this ordinance to give us that 45 days so we can work on those specifics as you're asking, and we can have that and bring that back to the board as a specific question to be answered. Thoughts on it?
and I think that no matter if it changes what's in this urgency ordinance or not, I think we do need to bring that data back so we're aware of what exactly we're doing, because I think we need to be transparent, because I think a lot of applicants are confused about their status of where they are, because there's been a lot of communication has not always been clear and evident.
Also, if you'll note in Section 8, there is a 10 days prior to the expiration of this interim urgency ordinance, the Community Development Department shall issue a written report describing measures taken or recommending measures. You can include an assessment of exactly where they are within that, because what you're speaking about, Supervisor, is exactly what the department should be providing to you.
Mr. Chair, I've been attempting to raise my hand, but don't seem to have that option with my present Zoom setup. So I just wanted to echo, as the interim CDD director, that we can absolutely gather that data and have it available within the 45-day period if this ordinance is adopted.
Well, if it's possible, I would love to get that information ASAP, because 45 days later, we might as well just put a full moratorium on early activation, because then the growing season is completely gone. And an early activation is for 6 months, so you give somebody an early activation in October, they're done in March, they haven't had a chance to plan, so that early activation is completely useless. I think that I get a lot of phone calls about the confusion of what the status of those applications are, and if we can come back and be very transparent about what the actual status is, if we don't know within 7 days what the status is, then the applicants are going to get a response of what their status is, because there's still confusion as to what's going on.
We'll do it as fast as we can, Mr. Chair. I do have an inquiry into staff to get a sense of how soon. We're just knee deep in the business of CDD right now.
And it's not up to me. It needs to be consensus if that's what we want. But I just think that either A, we just do a straight up moratorium, because I'd hate to play games with the applicants trying to make phone calls and trying to figure out where they are, only to find out 45 days later, or not being able to find out because of some confusion that still exists. I'd rather be, I just see some, the definitions are always difficult, because even when we tried some of these things, when clarifying the early activation and other steps like this, the deemed complete has been very difficult to know, because of the lack of the deemed complete emails and communication back to the applicants. And then there's the issue of the Streamlined Permitting Act, which kind of says if there is no communication, then it is complete, and that creates a large level of confusion. And I want to make sure that we are as transparent as possible to make sure that people aren't thinking that they're still in, or that they know that they're still in, because that's going to be a lot of phone calls and a lot of time spent on trying to clarify those things. So if it's possible, I would love to have that information. And again, looking for a consensus, if that's the case, if we want to spend time on that, or if not spend time on that.
Ready to move forward as is today. So we have the 45 days to get that opportunity. Community Development said they would get the information that's being asked for, so ready to move forward today with the ordinance.
Okay. Looking for the action.
Okay, I will offer the ordinance.
The ordinance has been offered. Johanna, roll call, please.
Okay, Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Scott? Aye. Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. And then moving on to item 6.8, or 12 p.m. Consideration of presentation by the Lake Area Planning Council on the Regional Transportation Plan and Active Transportation Plan. And before we get started on that, we did pull item 5.7. Just wanted to let everyone know that we will take that up next. So let's go ahead and go with our 12 p.m. item. And Supervisor Simon, you brought this to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Being on the Area Planning Council and LTA and APC, wanted an opportunity for this presentation to be given here at the board level. It's the Regional Transportation Plan and Active Transportation Plan that's going to be presented. I am not on Zoom, so I don't know who's
We do have
here to
Lisa
present.
David Bates on.
Oh, there you are, Lisa. And who's next to you right there? It's tough seeing the mask.
It's John.
Hey, John. How are you, John? So just wanted to give them opportunity. You know, we work very closely as a board, myself and Supervisor Sabatier sitting on there, and we're trying to get this information out to the public. I know that they've done a good job of reaching out to our advisory committees throughout the county and also on the website, and just trying to get the information out there in newspapers, and we want to take this opportunity because this is for long-term planning here in Lake County. So what I would like to do is turn it over to Lisa and John and allow you to do your presentation.
Okay, thank you Supervisor Simon and board. And I also want to thank Carol for helping us out and get this on an agenda. Lisa Davy Bates and myself both work with the Lake Area Planning Council. I'm John Spica, I'm the Senior Transportation Planner, and Lisa is the Executive Director. As Supervisor Simon mentioned, we are part of the Lake Area Planning Council. Supervisor Simon and Sabatier both sit on our board of directors, and I believe Supervisor Scott has as well in the past. In any case, I'd like to give a brief video presentation if that would work. I'm not sure if this is set up for that. Would I be able to share a screen and do that, or I guess I'll defer to whoever is running that.
Yeah, Matthew, if you can make sure and give them that sharing ability.
Yes, you should have the capacity to share your screen now. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Just quick question. Can you guys hear us okay? Because my video, my audio has kind of
loud and clear.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see this okay?
Yep.
Great. It's a quick video, and that'll kind of explain what we're trying to do and what kind of information we're trying to get out, and then I could follow up with a few questions afterwards. So let's see here.
Welcome to a brief presentation of the 2022 Regional Transportation Plan and Active Transportation Plan update. Both plans are being prepared by the Lake Area Planning Council, which serves as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for the Lake County region. The Lake APC board is made up of 2 county supervisors from the County of Lake and 2 city council members from each of its 2 incorporated cities, the city of Lakeport and the city of Clear Lake. 2 at-large members are also appointed to serve as directors, rounding out the board's 8-person makeup. The primary advisory bodies for the Lake APC include the Technical Advisory Committee, which consists of public works and community development officials from each of the 3 jurisdictions, as well as representatives from the California Highway Patrol, the Lake Transit Authority, and the Caltrans District 1 office. A second important advisory body to the Area Planning Council is the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council. This group advises on matters involving transit-dependent individuals within the region, including the elderly, disabled, and persons of limited means. Additional duties of the Lake Area Planning Council include the administration of the Call Box Program, otherwise known as the Lake Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies. And finally, Lake APC council members also serve a separate role as the board for the Lake Transit Authority. The primary function of the Lake APC is to allocate federal and state transportation funds to projects within the Lake County region. Funding is derived from a variety of state and federal programs, each having separate goals, addressing public needs ranging from road safety to greenhouse gas emissions reduction, the promotion of healthy lifestyles through active forms of transportation like walking or biking. Lake APC also assists regional and local agencies, including public works departments of the county and cities, as well as the region's transit agency, in identifying or applying for potential funds for priority projects. These can often be time-consuming processes, especially for staffs of local agencies that might lack the resources or time to compete for such funds. Finally, as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, the Lake APC is tasked with preparing the region's long-range transportation planning document. This regional transportation plan helps guide the decision-making process by setting long-range transportation goals for the region. So what is the Regional Transportation Plan? As noted, it is the area's long-range planning document for all forms of transportation throughout Lake County and its cities. It covers a 20-year horizon and is updated every 4 years to reflect changing conditions in the region over time. Its main purpose is to promote safe and efficient transportation for the movement of people and goods throughout the region. Examples of this are found in projects improving unsafe road conditions or dangerous intersection crosswalks, or else reducing congestion to improve trucking delivery routes. Basically, anything that helps to connect community members with areas both within or outside of their immediate surroundings. The plan includes all transportation modes in Lake County, such as highways, streets and roads, transit services, pedestrian facilities, and bicycle lanes, among others. This update process also covers an update to the active transportation plan. So what is the active transportation plan? This is a plan that focuses on improving and integrating bicycle and pedestrian networks throughout the region. Essentially, it is a focused form of transportation that deals with non-motorized or active transportation. Projects within the active transportation plan are eligible to apply for grants under a specific state program known as the Active Transportation Program. This is a highly competitive grant program that rewards well-planned, high-priority projects which are evaluated as part of the Active Transportation Plan. Lake County adopted its first Active Transportation Plan in 2016. Prior to that, the Regional Transportation Plan would normally include a section or element that covered non-motorized forms of transportation. For the previous RTP update in 2017, it was decided that the 2016 Active Transportation Plan would now serve as that component of the RTP, and both plans will be updated in conjunction from that point on. The Active Transportation Plan therefore serves two purposes. One as the non-motorized element, and also as a standalone document for projects that can potentially be funded by future rounds of the Active Transportation Program. Identifying needs and priorities for the region is a big part of either plan. There are plenty of needs to choose from for each transportation mode, whether they are on state highways or local roads, or serve bicycle and pedestrian purposes, or public transit, etc. Identifying those needs is important, but prioritizing may be even more so. This is done by soliciting feedback from local public works departments, state agencies, tribal governments, and your voices from the general public to determine how the next 20 years worth of improvements should unfold. Prioritizing is especially important because there are far more needs than available funding can accommodate. The RTP seeks to guide how these limited dollars should be spent. The process will look something like this. From now through the summer, we will be seeking public input to help guide the update. By mid-spring, we will have an idea of the local and regional needs and how important they'll be in meeting the overall transportation goals of the region. A draft of the updated Regional Transportation Plan and Active Transportation Plan, as well as the environmental review documents for each, should be posted by late summer. There will be a comment period specified for the documents at that time as well. Finally, we expect to present a final draft to the Board of the Lake Area Planning Council by the end of the fall. These will be publicly noticed meetings where additional comments can be made by the public along with those of the Area Planning Council Board prior to the plan's adoption. Again, we want to stress that your voice is important to this process. Transportation needs and issues that you bring up will be evaluated as part of the Regional Transportation Plan, and this will ultimately guide what the final plan will look like. Whether it's road safety or sidewalk accessibility or transit system improvements, or any barriers that make different forms of transportation more difficult in your local community, we want to know. So please make your voices heard. Here are the best ways to provide input. You could go to the website for the update project, which can be accessed at the web address in red. The site is interactive and will allow you to provide comments on maps in which you can pin written comments at specific locations within your community or the region as a whole. It will also include surveys and budget exercises where you can give us your feedback on where your concerns lie or which projects you believe warrant the most funding. Or feel free to email or write letters to staff, myself, John Spica, Senior Transportation Planner, at the email address in red, or else at the physical mailing address below that, Lake Area Planning Council, 525 South Main Street, Suite G, Ukiah, California, 95482. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for participating.
Okay, so that was our pitch for the most part. What I'd like to do just really quickly as well is go through this, our social pinpoint website that allows for comments for the plan itself. The address was shown on the presentation itself. It was lakeapc.mysocialpinpoint.com will get you here. You can also get it through the Lake APC website, which is lakeapc.org. In any case, just scrolling down would show there's an interactive map portion to it, which allows for anyone to zoom in on any specific area of the county, drop a pin, and you could leave a comment of what type of improvement or what type of project you'd be interested in that area. It's, as you can see, there's quite a few around Middletown and Clear Lake and Lakeport and such. So this is kind of a handy function for those of you wanting to be specific about what types of comments you're looking to make. Also, there's surveys, which are sort of self-explanatory, just asking some basic demographic data, age, location where you live, employment status and such, and what types of transportation you're most used to using or interested in seeing improvements on. And then these budget functions, these budget exercises on the right, then both, they give a kind of a sample amount. We give you this fictitious $100 to spend on different types of projects, and from here you kind of scroll over on what types of projects you think. There's I think 12 or so, 12 to 14, and you kind of scroll over and see about, you know, this one kind of, I think it deserves more money than something that maybe not important to me, and then you go up to your $100. Actually, you could go over budget, but try to stay in budget if you're able. And then there's a similar one, a similar budget exercise for the active transportation specific projects. So these would just focus on bicycle lanes or pedestrian facility type projects for more active portion of the document. So, like I said, that's sort of our brief little presentation, and I'd be happy to discuss any questions that board members or anyone from the public might have on our plan.
Thank you for your presentation. Supervisor Simon, did you have any final comments?
No, I just want to, once again, like I said, just getting the information out there. I think, if we can get that address in the chat or just have this posted up, but I know this is going to be shared in a lot more places as we move forward. And whether it's overall transportation or as we're all hit, hey, we need sidewalks here, we need a bike lane, those types of things. This is a great opportunity for you as a community member to really go to that pinpoint map and really zone in on how you think, it'll improve your neighborhood and how you move around in your community. So Once again, today's presentation, why you brought it today, was just to get more folks, more eyes on it, more input. Because we want to see that entire map with projects. I mean, that's where we want to go. And so today's presentation from Lisa and John is just one more step forward in that. I see there are some areas with some pins. We need to get that whole lake surrounded, because we all know that there's local projects that need to be done all the way around the lake. So that's it. That's all that I have today.
Thank you. And I think that, as you saw, there's a lot of icons around both incorporated cities. I think they have an advantage by having an organized local government that can work on those things and go ahead and add additional icons on that map. And so I would suggest that all the town hall groups, which I'm sure that's why Middletown has been so highlighted with icons, because those groups have already taken advantage of that as well, that we work with those groups to try and make sure and get the word out and get some projects put on there. Any comments or questions, Supervisor Crandall?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I know that Danielle Casey had come to one of our town hall meetings a couple weeks back. That was very helpful. And I know that a couple years back there was a collaborative town hall that we had in Lucerne, so we can cover areas in Nice, Lucerne, and Clear Lake Oaks. That way we had a idea of what potential mitigating measures to lessen traffic, make the walkways safe, things like that was conducted. And I know we were supposed to kind of go further on it, but then 2020 happened. So I know that they talked about those documents are still there, and I'd like to see if we can possibly get some folks out to our town councils. And but I'll reach out to Danielle. So thank you.
Thank you. Any comment from other Supervisor Pyska?
I would like to invite you to also come to the Cobb Area Council. That is a very active municipal advisory council in Cobb area. The Kelseyville area does not have a town hall or a MAC, and but they do have a very strong business association, the KBA. So I would encourage you to contact that group as well. And if you need help with those contacts, I'm more than happy to facilitate that. So thank you so much. But I know both of those communities have specific needs that they've already brought to me.
That's great, thank you. And if any of you know of a website or a Facebook page where we could share the information or add it to, please let us know, because we would be happy to do that as well.
So cobbareacouncil.org and visit Kelseyville. That's their Facebook page.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? I do have a quick question. I'm sorry if I missed it, but when is the deadline for comments to be submitted?
There's not a hard deadline that we provided, but we are going to try to get a draft prepared in the next several weeks. So, we've been kind of had this, well, it's not so much a road show as a video show nowadays, but we have gone to a couple of the town halls and a couple of other city council meetings and such. But we're just, any comments are useful at this point, all the way. I mean, I would say a couple more months even we could probably look at, preferably within the next month. But we'll keep continuing to take comments. In fact, probably all the way up to adoption, really, at the board, APC board adoption meeting, we still take comments through that as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I know that in looking at the presentation, for some reason I had never really connected the two, but I know that Supervisor Crandall and I have been on the National Monument Trail meetings that have happened from BLM, and looking at ways to connect the city of Clear Lake to those trails that they're anticipating to create would be great. So I'll make sure and speak with the city of Clear Lake and see what would be the best way to connect those things and go ahead and add those to your maps. I did want to say something about the Lake County APC. You mentioned that there's 2 public at-large members. I believe that we've had an opening for quite a while for another public at-large. So I just want to put that out there to the public, that if you are interested in helping to make decisions on what is happening within our Area Planning Council, which have dealt with many important parts, such as adding bus bus ramps or creating sidewalks or even being a part of the discussion of what's happening right now on Highway 29 with the expansion. These are important things that are happening in our community, and if you want to participate in a way that your vote will count rather than just your voice being heard, then please make sure to get a hold of myself or Supervisor Simon so we can make sure and get your application into the committee as well.
Yes, thank you for that plug, Bruno.
Anytime I could do a shameless plug, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Let's go ahead and open it up to the public if there's no further comments from the board. And I see that we have a hand up from phone 82809. If you can please say your first and last name. We can hear you.
Hello.
Hello.
Is this regarding 5.7?
No, not yet. We are on that topic next.
Okay, great. Thank you. I will call back. I will hold. Thank you.
Okay. And looks like we have no further public comment in the Zoom room. Anything from the board chambers? Okay. Well, let's bring it back to the board. Is there any further comments or questions? All right. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I hope that you get a little bit more input from the public because of this.
Thank you. We really want to thank you for letting us take some time out of your really busy day. We know you have a lot on the agenda, so we really appreciate your time.
And thank you for being patient with us.
No problem. Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So now we are done with our timed items. We're going to go back and take up item 5.7, approve second reading of an ordinance amending section 21-3.7 of Chapter 21 of the Ordinance Code of the County of Lake by adopting sectional district zoning map number 3.7B 1.403. And we have Mr. Porter from Community Development stepping in. And let me ask if Carol Hutchinson wants to start us off with this or just go straight to Mr. Porter.
Mr. Chair, I'll just note that this is the second read of this zoning ordinance change, so staff doesn't have an additional presentation, but is here to answer any questions your board may have.
Okay, and so at this point, I'll open it up to the board for any questions or comments. And seeing none, let's go ahead and open up to the public. And I know that we had somebody who was ready to speak on this item. I don't know if I see them anymore.
That individual appears to have temporarily dropped off.
Wow.
So, Mr. Chair, in light of the fact that it seemed very important to that person, maybe they've just had a technical difficulty and you could go on to a different item and with hope that person comes back. They contacted our office a number of times wanting to be able to speak to your board about this.
And I see that a new phone number did pop up. Is that individual ending in 8209 here for item 5.7?
It is the same phone number.
And so we are looking for public input on item 5.7. Go ahead and you have 3 minutes. And please provide us your name. Hello?
Hello. My name is Carolyn Brockmeyer. I own the property adjoining Mr. Brown's property. My property is commonly known as 24681 South Highway 29, Middletown. I strongly object to Mr. Brown's rezoning project. Back in November, I informed the Planning Commission that as a child, I saw workmen bury a whole case of a whole dynamite case full of liquid mercury bottles in an area that is now part of Mr. Brown's main reservoir adjoining my deeded easement. In cooperation, my ex-spouse also sent a sworn statement to the effect that he had seen 2 bottles of liquid mercury that I had been given to play with as a child, which was kept in my parents' dining room in Vallejo, California. Somehow his letter, my spouse's letter, got shoved aside. Mr. Porter claimed to know, claimed no knowledge of which site I was referring to, so he had the water tested in a site away from the main reservoir. And of course it came up negative because it was nowhere near the site that I described. As such, I'm now forced to test for mercury and heavy metal contamination in all the wineries, both in Napa County and in Lake County. I have invited an investigative reporter to join me in my investigation. Furthermore, Mr. Brand has, on the preliminary map, shown my deeded easement as a fire lane. Not only is my deeded easement not a fire lane, but it could never qualify as one as it is approximately 10 feet wide and has a steep incline. Mr. Brand has over the past 30 years tried to separate me from my property by denying me ingress and egress over my deeded easement. He is well aware of this easement as I have sent him a copy of it several years ago. Mr. Brand has offered to buy my 140 acres for a princely sum of $100,000 cash. How generous. Now that all other methods have failed, Mr. Brand now wants to do away with my easement, calling it a fire lane, which can be shut off, completely denying me access to my property. I will not allow Mr. Brand to deny me access to my property so that he can force me off the land that has been in my family for almost 67 years. Far longer than Mr. Brand has owned his land. Either Mr. Brand needs to go back to the drawing board and designate the so-called fire lane as a deeded easement, or the state of California can come in and investigate how a deeded easement came to be designated as a fire lane. I'm sure that the state will thoroughly investigate to determine who made the initial request, who decided that the easement met the requirements for a fire lane, and finally who made the final approval to use it as a fire lane. Mr. Brand needs to redraw his map to properly designate my deeded easement as such. Until such time as the two aforementioned problems have been solved, I firmly oppose Mr. Brand's zoning plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I do have multiple questions that pop up in my mind. One, in the rezoning process, and I'm asking Mr. Porter or Ms. Grant, in the rezoning process, we're not changing the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the plats and legals of what easements are on the property. All we're doing is rezoning it, and so those things are still intact, and that would be a civil matter of dealing with neighbors and easements. This would not change upon our decision today. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
The ordinance, as it is proffered, simply changes one zoning designation to another zoning designation. That's what this ordinance does.
And maybe upon splitting the properties, which seems to be the plan, into 4, at that point, each one needs to make sure that, or that's where they have to deal with the easements being continued on the split, or do those easements continue to exist within the split automatically?
I can answer that. Go ahead.
Please, Mr. Porter.
Thank you. Conditions number 5, 10, 11, and 12 are associated with the parcel map. They're not associated with the zone change. And they have to do with the dedication and improvements of the opening leading into the Brand property, which is tight, narrow, problematic, and steep. It would widen it to meet Caltrans requirements. That was one of the issues that Ms. Brockmeyer had raised with me about a week ago. The second part is they would have to improve the interior part of the road that's shared by the Brand family and by the neighbors. It actually splits off. The Brand Road goes off to the right. What's called Roberts Road, thank you, on the parcel map. That's fine.
Hold on one second, Ms. Grant.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, you've got one issue today, the rezone ordinance. If you really don't have the ability to reopen the substance of the public hearing that you had, I thought the answer was going to be more of just a simple procedural one. But Mr. Porter's getting into specifics here, which is going to lead to additional questions and issues. And the item on the agenda is the second reading of a zoning ordinance.
And I guess I got the answer correct I got the answer to my first question, which I think is the most important. The decision we make today does not change the easements that have already been applied to the parcels that we are rezoning. It's just the zoning itself that is being changed. The rest can be dealt with outside of the decision-making that's happening today on this item.
Well, and the caller can certainly look at her rights with regard to the decision that your board's already made. Neither your board nor I can give legal advice to the caller, but she's completely capable of looking at that as well. But the hearing has already occurred. Your board made a decision and closed the item, except for the ordinances the ordinance here for this particular project for the rezone. And as you pointed out, that's all it accomplishes today.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? I can't see the Zoom room. There we are. Nope, nothing there. And so we had closed public comment, and so there was a response to the public comment that was made. And at this point, I am ready for action.
Chair, it's a motion. We're just going to offer the ordinance.
You offer the ordinance, that's correct.
The ordinance has been offered by Supervisor Simon. Johanna, roll call, please.
Okay, Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and take up item 5.1. That was pulled also from our, Mr. Porter, thank you very much.
Thank you. I was also here for item 5.8. Should I stay?
I don't believe we pulled 5.8. I believe we only pulled 5.7.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you again. Okay, 5.1, allocation of cannabis taxes to the Middle Creek Restoration Project design cost. So I will go ahead and start and present this to the board. As you know, the Middle Creek Restoration Project has been in the works for decades. We are getting some movement and getting some property acquisition. However, we're not getting much movement when it comes to getting the Army Corps or not necessarily the Army Corps, but the federal government to approve the appropriations so that the Army Corps can start their actions in doing the construction design for the project. The construction design is estimated to be about $3.2 million. Us, as the local district, we are meant to cover 25% of that, which is approximately $800,000. We are struggling to get headway with our federal sponsors or representatives to get this moving forward. They have put it on the docket as a priority project, but there is something in the range of $2.1 billion worth of projects, if not more, that are backlogged in the Army Corps of Engineers docket. What we feel is if we can show that we do have the funding ready to get started, allocated for this project, that we would have a much better position to make the request for the federal government to release those funds for that project. I'm not going to belabor the points of what the Middle Creek Restoration Project will do for us. You're very well aware of that. But the idea is we're not asking to spend the money right now. What we did back in June is we reviewed our cannabis tax allocation plan. We had items 1 through 9, which was retention, law enforcement, water resources, planning, economic development. There was a laundry list of items that we approved for. We did make some subtle changes to those, and what I'm asking today is not for a final approval of this, but to have the final approval come back with item number 10, which would have $800,000 allocated for the construction design phase of the local jurisdiction's costs for the Middle Creek Restoration Project. I'm looking to get $400,000 out of item number 1, which is water resources would fall into there. And then, and I don't have it right in front of me yet, let me open it up. And then the second one would come from item number 2, or item number 3, which is economic development, housing, and risk reduction. And since this is for flood control purposes and also expanding the amount of acre feet of storage that we have in our lake, this would definitely fall under the category of risk reduction. And while I didn't state it in my memo, the better health of our lake is definitely part of our economic development as well. So trying to figure out where those monies would come from and create that line item rather than just asking for more money to be placed in a new line item was my preferred way to go. So unless Supervisor Crandall has anything else to add?
No, we just want to have a better position for the Army Corps to see that we're serious about the project, and we have our funding prepared to put towards the $3.2 million in the project construction design.
And just one final point, the reason originally I was thinking of pulling this money out and putting it into a budget item, I believe 8109 is where it would be situated, which is our watershed protection district. I recognize that the way right now that our cannabis taxes is being spent is through reimbursement. You have to show that you're actually spending it in order to get it reimbursed and paid for. Here, we would just be putting it to the side to show the federal government we have the money, it's ready to be spent, to try to get them to move their wheels so this project can move forward. We do have a deadline, which we are trying to extend, of March 2022 to expend all of our monies to purchase all of the properties within the project area. Hoping that we can maybe get an extension since things had slowed down for us drastically during COVID-19 of last year. We brought that to you already to discuss the situation. We are working with our state currently with water resources to try and make those make the property acquisition still possible and a viable thing to get done in time. We're doing everything we can, and we think that this will allow us to continue the progress of the project rather than be done with property acquisition and then start from scratch. I believe, if I am correct, and Dr. Lyons, if he was here, would know better than any of us, but I believe that the appropriations of funds for the Army Corps based on a 2-year interval, and so it's not on an annual basis that they get allocated.
That's correct.
Okay. So just, I think that's all that I have for now, unless you have further questions for me, and opening it up for the rest of the board.
Well, yeah, the reason that I pulled it is I was confused why it was on the consent agenda. I know we've talked about it a lot. I'm definitely in support of this project and any way that we can move it forward. I do think that cannabis funds are the appropriate use for this, but I don't know why it didn't go to the cannabis committee to talk about it and then bring it as a recommendation for the final budget. I feel like we have that process set up, and so I was just wondering, you know, A, why it was on consent without this discussion, and B, why it didn't go through that channel.
So I do have answers for that. Number one, the consent agenda, because this is not the final approval of the allocations of cannabis taxes that will come to us in our September meeting for the final budget approval. And number two, there's two individuals on the Middle Creek Restoration Project, and there's two individuals, I think one is shared on the Cannabis Committee, and by moving some information from one committee to another committee to review, all of a sudden there's 3 of us reviewing the same thing, and that could be seen as a Brown Act violation, and I want to try to stay away from those as far as I can.
So wouldn't a more appropriate action be to request, and I know this is just a procedure thing, but we have these procedures set up for a reason. Wouldn't it be better to bring it to the board to then bring it to the committee?
Well, I was looking for efficiency so that we can start, what's the word I'm looking for? trying to start to have conversations with our federal government to get things moving forward, because this had been approved, granted not final, but really wanting to use this as a leverage point to get the conversation moving forward.
Well, I guess I would just like to hear from the committee members and hear what their thoughts are on this.
The rest of the committee, you mean?
From the cannabis, are you talking about the cannabis committee?
Middle Creek.
Right, the cannabis committee.
Okay. Well, I know that I'm on that as well. And yes, actually, that's one of the discussions we've had in the past, was talking about trying to put funding towards this project, but that it could possibly come from the itemized sections like planning code and water. I know we talked about it also with water resources, because they're part of our group in the Middle Creek Restoration. So yeah, for us, it's just on the Middle Creek side, it's to have it prepared so we're not delaying and waiting to come back at a later time and get held up even further. We're just trying to get ahead of the game. And to bring it to the Cannabis Board, I mean, we can entertain that as well. I just think that the whole idea was just to bring it here so we can have it put forward initially, and so that we can discuss it at another day during the budget time frame, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Supervisor Scott, I believe you are the other member on that committee?
I am, and you know, we did separate this money into these allocations that you did specify here, and I understand the whole Brown Act. There would be three of us kind of understanding this knowledge, so I kind of understand why you brought it to us, and the fact that the Cannabis Committee already has these allocations set aside for these purposes. I would be in favor of going ahead and approving this, knowing that the Middle Creek Restoration Project is probably one of the most important projects for Lake County that we've been working on for a long extended amount of time, and I'm ready to see this through. So I would approve this funding put aside for this project.
Supervisor Pyska, can I ask another question? Would you feel more comfortable if it was like on a different, like on non-timed item or something like that? Or is that what it was? Is this, it was on the consent agenda?
Yeah, it just really caught me off guard. Because it, you know, because I know that we have a process, and then to see it on the consent agenda, not having a discussion, that's my only concern with this. I'm totally in favor of this funding for this use.
No, I understand, and I did that. I didn't think of that, and I apologize. Yeah.
Supervisor Simon?
Yeah, you know, when I was asking to have it pulled, it was the same conversation. You know, we work hard together to put each other on committees that we feel either we're passionate about or we know that's, you know, in our community. And my thought was the same thing. You know, why didn't this go through the Cannabis Committee and then come to the board from that way? You know, and understand, appreciate the explanations. But we work hard on these committees. You know, we're working hard on a million. We're all on different committees. But that's what it's for us to vet it, bring it back, and then when the recommendation of us, you know, because we all decide who's on those committees, to support them as they move through that process. So that was the reason, you know, I was going to pull it off, but Supervisor Pyska beat it to me, just to make sure that, you know, we are working through those processes and we're respecting the committees and the work that the folks that are doing on it, because, you know, it's not just us board members. It's all the directors and everybody involved with it, admin, that helps us move through that process. So I was pulling through it. Obviously, we know this is a good project, but I would have a question on the finances. And I understand it's a $3.2 million project, and you know, you know, we have the 25% total cost for the construction design, our local district. You know, if there was a possibility that you got full funding for the project or something, would this money be reimbursed to the cannabis side if that came in?
Since the money has not been used and it's just been put on a line item for cannabis taxes, absolutely. And if we can save even $1 on this project, we would jump on that. So yes.
I understand, and I do understand exactly, you know, when you have that money in the pocket, it helps with those conversations. But that was my main thing, you know, respecting the committees that we set up here, because I know we all do hard work on those when we're on there, and vetting it through the committee and then bringing it here. Just We know that it's fully analyzed, and heck, we all have ideas, but we want to make sure we're running them through the right committees and those types of things. So that was my concern on it.
And I'm pretty much 100% sure that there will be another committee meeting prior to the budget. For instance, we're working on the roadmap task force. We don't know what that budget looks like yet, and so that budget's going to be resubmitted to the Cannabis Tax Committee in order to be approved prior to coming to us for our final approval. This was simply, do we want to even entertain the idea of putting this in the cannabis tax before it comes back to us on the final approval, which would also go through the committee in the long run before coming back to us for that final approval. So I think in the long run, we're all doing exactly what needs to be done. I just didn't want to submit something without the board's consensus to be brought to. And I heard a click, which means I believe Ms. Grant had a comment. Oh, I could have sworn I heard that strong click.
No, I think also just being super careful because our Middle Creek meetings are, they're actually publicized and whatnot. I'm not sure if the Cannabis Committee meeting is necessarily, but I know that the Middle Creek Restoration Committee is, and you and I are on that. People see that. I don't know. We're very careful about the Brown Act. There's a lot of sticklers out there, so. Yeah.
All right. Any further comment before we open up to the public? Supervisor Pyska?
No, just, I think it's important that we're all being sticklers right now. And, Supervisor Simon and I aren't on either of those committees. So probably that's why, we got a little concerned when we saw it here just for process. So that's it.
Okay. Let's go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone have any comments on item 5.1? Seeing none in the boardroom and none in the Zoom room, let's go ahead and bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to direct staff to allocate cannabis funds to the construction design cost for the Middle Creek Restoration Project. Do I need to say the amount? $800,000, $400 coming from item 1 on the cannabis allocation, and $400 to come from number 3, economic development, housing, and risk reduction.
Second.
We have a motion from Supervisor Crandall, a second from Supervisor Scott. Johanna, roll call, please.
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall,
Yes.
Supervisor Scott,
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska,
Yes.
and Supervisor Sabatier.
Aye. And I'm going to break protocol here. I completely missed that Director De Leon was here with us on the Zoom. Want to make sure that if he had a comment that I did not ignore him.
No, thank you very much. Just following the proceedings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So that fulfills our items that we pulled from the consent agenda. Now let's go ahead and move on to our untimed. And I think we're going to take a quick break here. We are going to continue when we come back on item 7.2. So let's go ahead and reconvene at 3:25. Hello. All right, let's go ahead and reconvene our meeting. And it is 3:25, just checking in. Looks like we have all of our supervisors back with us. Checking to see if Supervisor Pyska is back. And she is. Awesome. Okay, so item 7.2A, discussion and consideration of code enforcement priorities during the drought emergency, and B, consideration of code enforcement ad hoc committee. This is sponsored by myself and Supervisor Crandall. Supervisor Crandall, would you like to take this, or you want me to get it started?
Yeah, so this is in light of many different constituents and people calling. We've been having an influx of concerns with illegal grows, and there's many people that are dealing with this, especially in my district, but I think all over the county. And so when it comes to enforcing priorities during this drought emergency, especially because when we have some of these plans come to the Planning Commission, of course the first subject that comes up is water. But at the same time, it's kind of, I think it's auspicious to take advantage of that in a submitted plan. But then when you think about the illegal grows that are getting away with this and just taking water in general from different areas, having it trucked in, we wanted to shed some light on this, and then that's why we decided to come forward with some of this and give code enforcement some direction.
Thank you for starting this off. And as you know, code enforcement had been working with our sheriff department on a task force, and unfortunately that task force was not able to continue due to staffing issues over at our sheriff's department. And so what we want to see is, number one, how can we tie the code enforcement activities directly to drought emergency issues? So hazardous vegetation is one of them. We just heard from CAL FIRE earlier and how much fuel there is out there and how dry it is. Illegal cannabis grows, and then there's the continuous and now almost becoming statewide issue of water trucks and their activities dealing with the drought. There are some water trucks out there that are doing exactly what they should be doing. I don't want this to be seen or heard that whoever has a water truck roaming around in Lake County is doing something that is bad or negative. But there are some that are doing incorrect activities, such as delivering water to illegal grows, as well as delivering water to legal grows. And so how do we work together to make this a more viable situation where we can get consequences, neighborhoods can get some respite from the dealings of illegal cannabis grows and feeling safe in their environment? What can we do to help? And I do recognize that there is a community development committee. However, this committee that we are offering for code enforcement is not to change the infrastructure, is not to change anything other than looking at what the priorities are and how it is that we can provide some tools for code enforcement to be successful. I know that we already have had the high definition satellite imagery that has been available to us. I know that we do have some images that have been received. I want to know how we can utilize those better. I know that there are things that other jurisdictions are doing that seem to be very efficient and very successful. How can we incorporate those during our drought emergency? I think it's important to align with things that we claim are an emergency, and I think that we can help code enforcement through this committee that we can create. I know that Supervisor Crandall and myself met with the sheriff yesterday to discuss some ideas, and these are the types of ideas that I think we should be bringing to the table to discuss at greater length, and not just, like, for instance, I would have loved to bring you a water truck ordinance today, but it's so many different departments that have to be involved in it that sitting down at a round table is a much better idea. And since we have a policy of not utilizing more than a certain number of hours of staff before we have to ask for permission, I figured it would be the time now to ask for that permission to create the committee. As you could see, the committee itself would be consist of the following: the interim community development director or their designee, the county council or their designee, code enforcement manager or their designee, the sheriff, and all of them is or designee, water district director. We know that for example, Spring Valley is on a public water system, and how can we work with that public water system to try and reduce access to water, to again save water and combat the issues of illegal grows, and then myself and Supervisor Crandall on that ad hoc committee. The intention again is not to overlap with CDD. I think CDD has a very large big picture view of what is going to happen there and what needs to change. We're just looking at the next 3 to 4 months and how can we help to be as successful as possible, rather than saying we're going to start working on this and hopefully have a better impact next year. I think we need to do our best as possible to look at today and what can be done. And so, unless I missed anything, all right, and opening it up for discussion from the board. Supervisor Scott?
I do have a question with the fact that we've already kind of put together a committee to look at priorities, and I believe code enforcement was one of those, and we were talking about county priorities when we all brought 3 projects that we wanted to bring forward. Instead of developing another committee, could this be something that committee could look at also? Because they're already looking at projects, I believe, that have to do with code enforcement. Could this be something, instead of developing another committee, have those committee members take this on?
The Roadmap Task Force is looking at community revitalization and not necessarily at the drought. This one would be specifically looking at the drought, and by the time that I think that committee of the Roadmap Task Force is done, then I think at that point we'll see some rain and we'll see some changes in how many illegal grows are occurring, because of the fact that harvest season has already been completed. It's going to take some time before we put it through to the budget and then have an actual action plan put into place. And so I don't think that they will overlap at all, as that becomes more of a larger picture of, again, code enforcement overall versus how do we align with the drought declaration that we've just provided. Supervisor Simon?
Yeah, I know you say it has no intention of, conflicting with the CDD, committee, but this is, code enforcement is a part of CDD. That's what it is. So we already have a committee. We're looking, obviously, to bring on a new community development director, looking to get those things moving forward. And 2 of the priorities on here as key priorities, new priorities, the only new one would be the illegal water trucks, illegal cannabis grows, hazardous vegetation. That should always be a priority of community development, unless we made a decision as a board, which I don't remember, that is their priorities. Vegetation abatement, they were sending out letters reporting to the Risk Reduction Authority. Illegal cannabis grows, we've all reported those things through there. This, once again, I think we have a committee that could look at this and look at the opportunity. Myself and Jessica Peisker are on that. Supervisor Scott mentioned the Roadmap Task Force Committee that is already together and moving forward. So don't disagree with, we're all getting calls and all these things and trying to deal with that. But we're also trying to reestablish community development. We're looking to bring on a new director and to make sure that we're supporting them in the best manner that we can. And I know most of the folks are putting on this, at least a few of them on this list are already on, a couple of the other committees. So I don't know what the sheriff's participation in this committee would be any different than the other committee that was just disbanded. So I'm a little confused on that. If sheriff couldn't work in that committee, how come we can work in this committee all of a sudden, or provide a designee?
So the previous was not a committee, it was the actual task force where he had his staff involved?
So he had his staff involved, so this won't have staff involved from the Sheriff's Department?
And I think that's where the problem solving needs to be done, and that's where Supervisor Crandall and I met with him yesterday to discuss some of those ideas. But I am not willing to move forward with law enforcement ideas without someone from the Sheriff's Department being at the table to support those ideas or to vet those ideas, rather than just bringing something to the board that has not gone through those steps.
So, I'll just let you know, consideration of code enforcement priorities during the drought emergency, completely agree with that. But at this point, I think we have committees that this could go through with those priorities, and that's my thought on it.
Okay.
There is quite a bit of overlap with the roadmap task force. I know Supervisor Crandall is not on that, and his district does have a lot of the illegal cannabis issues. I am concerned also that we have too many committees going here, and I am concerned about staff time. So I'm not sure about this either. I think that we have the priority set with code enforcement, and we have the roadmap task force in place. So if we wanted to take a deeper dive, we could do it there. It sounds like you want this committee to be short-term while the roadmap task force is long-term. Is that what you mentioned?
Correct.
Is there a way to just fold this into the roadmap task force and have a separate agenda item there? It's already created.
As far as I'm concerned, the roadmap task force right now is operating in the idea to complete a budget, to provide that budget as a potential expenditure by mid-September for us to approve. And at that point, I feel that what we are looking to have an impact on would already be lost. For the fact that harvest season is only another 30 days from there. And it takes a while to go through the process. I would love for this process to start occurring right away for the fact that we're already behind schedule in dealing with it and making an impact on the communities that are mostly affected by these things. And again, which includes the protection of our waters in order to make sure that people who have wells are continuing to have access to those wells, and that our water districts who are already having a struggle in providing quality potable water to our faucets do not have to be the burden is not exacerbated by the continuation of illegal growth.
Well, I think we all agree with that. I guess I would like to hear from the sheriff to see if he has time for another committee on this, and maybe you discussed that at your meeting with him the other day. And when we have the roadmap task force taking code enforcement time, and then another committee taking code enforcement time, I'm just wondering at what point do we get counterproductive?
And the sheriff's not here to respond to that. He was open to continue those discussions that we had yesterday. I can't say specifically he said, yes, I have time for this, or no, I don't have time for this. But I felt we had a really good, healthy, productive conversation to help move things forward and really have a good start to the conversation. I'll let Supervisor Simon.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, and I know we have folks in the audience today, but all districts are affected by illegal cannabis. There's no doubt about it. Some of the decisions we made today will hopefully help us move forward, but everybody's district is affected. I know each community thinks they're affected the most, but each one of our districts, I have Jerusalem Valley, I have South County, we heard today, in Jerusalem Great out there, a gentleman surrounded by, 9 grows, and 2 of them are permitted. So, and these are large operations. If you haven't been out there, they are. So clearly understand the need. Just want to make sure we stay focused, because as Supervisor Price said, we're getting all over the place here and pulling a million different directions. Those 2 priorities, illegal cannabis grows and hazardous vegetation, are at this point a priority of code enforcement. But obviously, as you know, with the Community Development Committee, we're working on getting the leadership and then filling the roles to give them the backing, because I know we did a good job this year in the budget process. We approved more code enforcement. We improved opportunities to help with that. We just, we've still got work to do. So,
Supervisor Scott.
I don't disagree that illegal cannabis grows and hazardous vegetation is already a priority of ours, and I think this is a mistake we've made in the past, that we've pushed too much on department, and we then see no progress. And I think this is adding to a plate that we're already working on with different committees. With these are priorities. I think we need to let that committee work on redeveloping CDD, and then go from there. And from what they come up with, move forward. But I do not believe adding another committee is going to help us.
And if it's possible to pivot the conversation, I don't necessarily disagree with the lots and lots of committees and overlap. What is our plan? I know we have a plan for what we're doing on CDD, but that plan, whether you like the comment or not, the public doesn't really care what we're working on internally. They care about what they're getting in their communities. What is our plan to make an impact on the people that are having to endure some of the issues that they are enduring right now? If there can be some direction, then that would be, I think, a better outcome of this conversation than a yes or a no on this.
And I agree with that. That's why I think to our interim community development director at this point, consideration of code enforcement priorities during the drought emergency, and giving that direction to our current CDD interim director at this point, and saying, listen, this is a priority. We need to get this moving without creating a committee, and we're going to need some responses to that. So I think, given direction today, I'm prepared to do that with these priorities that you have here, and we need it to come back, like you were saying on the last item. Hey, we need that in next week or the following week. We need a proposal or what's going to be done, because we are all dealing with this throughout it, and hopefully some of the decisions we made as a board with the drought ordinance and the early activation, that we can get some more movement on that. So that would be something to go right along with this, because I don't disagree with you. I just think that we need to go about it a little bit differently and starting to get those responses to the street. I do agree with that. So that would be my I would offer that suggestion, that we give that direction to our interim community development director, make it very clear today, these are the priorities that we really want to move to the top of the list.
Yes, and I just wanted to highlight too that, I appreciate that we're coming to somewhat of a consensus. We understand that this may burden, having another ad hoc. I understand that. I can't find out unless we have a report, and so I'm not able to give a, descriptive, I can't tell the group what's going on, because I don't know until we have a meeting. So they're churning, seeing the illegal grows, being threatened by illegal activity in their areas, respective areas, especially Spring Valley and in Double Eagle Ranch and whatnot. And so we're thinking of things to do on our own, just in their communities. And so it would help. It would help if the director or the appointed director would give some sort of insight and have a presentation, so they have a forum instead of public input to give some of their testimonies and ideas and be a part of it, because they do want to be a part of helping to do so. They have ideas and whatnot, and so I think they were all, that's one of the things we talked about in one of the most recent meetings we had, was if we did have a committee as such, they would like to be here to be a part of it, like any other ad hoc committee. But no, I'm glad we're talking about it, and I hope we get somewhere with it. And I know that the folks out in these areas, and of course all over, I know that Cobb has them as well. We talked about it last week, Jessica, and Moke, I'm pretty sure you guys deal with it too. I just, yeah.
Any further comments on this item? And I'm going to open it up for the public. Dan Terrell.
Thank you again. As much as another committee is super exciting, I'm sure everybody's just sitting there thinking, wow, another committee. I think, having intelligent people, which we have in this county, put in the right places is where it's at. And we're out here. Oh, by the way, I would invite any of the supervisors who think that harvest is over in November to come on out to my property and have a firsthand account. This is a 365-day operation out here with hoop houses and lights. They're running all year long. It's not done in October and November. It's all year. With that being said, action is kind of where we're at. We know what the problems are. I've talked with the county about the permitted grows, not just the illicit ones, but the permitted ones that are violating the ordinances, violating their own permits, and nothing's being done. I've talked with supervisors about it as well. Nothing's being done. And I can't go out there in the middle of the night and chop down people's fields. You know, it's against the rules. I can't do that stuff. I'll be arrested for trespassing and vandalism. But they're able to truck water in and damage the roads. And they're not going to pay me to have a new well dug because my water's run out. What's the incentive? What's the incentive for any of us out here to go through the permitting process if nothing is being enforced? I could put out 40 different greenhouses in the back of my 21 acres, and I could have water trucked in 10 times a day, and nobody's going to do a damn thing about it. But we're going to have these committees come in and we're going to talk about it some more. You know what the problem is? Your constituents tell you what the problem is, but nobody does anything. It's getting kind of old. It would be nice if, okay, you guys know what the problem is. The people that run the county, the administrators know what the problem is. Let the people do the work. Let code enforcement go out and enforce the rules. I don't want to bust good people. I don't think that's right. Good people that do what they're supposed to do is great, but when you got garbage blown over your property and people are dumping not just toxic stuff, but like one of the neighbors was dumping poop, literally feces from a green, they had like an outdoor outhouse and pardon my language, they're shitting on their neighbor's property. How is this even acceptable? And then they called and nobody did a damn thing. Not one. I know the person called. He said, I called county and then nobody ever came out. So that's the problem. It's not that we don't have enough committees out here. It's we don't have enough action. And it's really frustrating. It's horribly frustrating. And it's costing us a lot of money just to live out here to have water trucked in so our wives and kids and no livestock or anything, but we can take showers and flush our damn toilets. My neighbor can't flush his toilet. He don't have any water. But these guys are having water trucked in and they're pumping out the aquifer. 365 days out of the year they're running it. So don't say it's done in November, because it ain't. You're welcome to come out. Anybody who wants to come out, come on out, take a look. They're running it all year. Thank you.
Didn't get his name.
Yeah, we got his name.
Okay.
Maybe he didn't say it, but it's written, and it's who it is. Just wanted to let you know, the committee is not to figure out what the problem is. It's to go through the legal process of what is the legal way to deal with this and the most efficient way to deal with this, because we do have things on the books. It's not getting us the results that we want. Code enforcement is not being told to sit down and stay in their office. They are out there, and they are doing work. It's just unfortunate that certain things are easier to deal with than others, and this is something that obviously, because of the years that have gone by and the lack of good real results to make the change, we've just become overwhelmed and have not been able to make the impact we want to make. And unfortunately, it's not just Lake County, but it matters more for us here, and it especially matters if it's something that's right next remote to your house and you're being impacted by it. So the committee is not to just sit down and talk and figure out what's wrong. It's a way to figure out and talk what is not working for us and what do we need to do, because we can't just go out there and cut down plants either. That is not something that we're allowed to do. We have to go through a process, and how do we minimize that process and make it the most efficient way to get it done? And so that's why we need to have those minds put together. But I digress. Any further public comment in the boardroom?
I get a little nervous when I get up here to talk, so I'm going to use some notes.
If you can wait till you're at the microphone and please provide your name.
Tony Morris. I said I get a little nervous when I get up to talk and then I forget what I want to talk about. I live in Spring Valley. I've been there for 5 years, moved there because it was kind of a cool little community and looked like it was on its way up. I think there was maybe a handful of grows out there 5 years ago that everybody kind of knew they grew, and they left them alone because they didn't bother anybody. But now they intrude on our lives every day, not only with the equipment and stuff that goes up there, but people being threatened and harassed at gunpoint. I wasn't sure about this, and I didn't bring it up when we were here last week, but I talked to the ladies that it's happened to. It's been on more than one occasion. Let me read you a list here. Stolen cars, cars in the creek, trashed campgrounds, rollover at 35 miles an hour on the main road, head-on collision on the main road at speeds over 35 miles an hour, a shooting, 3 fires, and threatened homeowners. All of this happened between last year's end of the season and now. And that's probably 5 times whatever used to happen in Spring Valley. It's a criminal activity. They're stealing, they have meters that they're using that they've stolen from the houses that have burned out in the fires, and they're running hoses and equipment over to grows to water them. They bring water trucks up every day. The big grow up on the hill brought 2 double semi loads of dirt up again. So they're getting ready for another grow that's going to go past the season. Also, they're growing 3-month plants that are in and out of the ground in 90 days, so they can do multiple grows in a single season if they get started early enough. So we have a huge grow up on the hill. I don't know how many plants it has. It has 8 or 10 greenhouses up there. They took it down earlier in the season. They are back up and running again. The greenhouses are nicer and newer than they were before. Enforcement isn't doing anything because you took its teeth away. I don't know that it's you specifically, but code enforcement can only tag them and then wait the process out. The sheriff's department has to be involved in going and taking the plants, which they did a couple different times, but they don't care. They're arrogant about what they do. They don't care what you guys do. They don't think you can touch them. They literally, if they get tagged with the code enforcement, they change the property owner so that the next guy, they don't see the next season that it's the same guy growing, but it's somebody in the family, and they've just moved it on down the line. There's a huge process involved in the whole mentality of what they do to grow, and I don't think that your district committee knows all of those things enough to make valid decisions in regards to our future out there. I was mistaken when I came in last week and said there's 52 grows out there. There's maybe 100, maybe more. And we're talking about a complete residential area zoned R1 that is family homes on 1/4 acre and 1/3 acre lots. We're not out in the middle of nowhere where there's a bunch of people. There's 460 homes back there that have to put up with this every day, including the trash and the siphoning the water out of the creek is a big one now. I guess we're going to try to work with that, but they go down to Wolf Creek and they siphon water out every single day. And it's not just one guy doing it. It's a handful of groups that go down there and do it on a regular basis. So we're not looking for a long-term committee. We're looking for something that somebody can help us now. What does it take? I mean, last year somebody got shot and they didn't die. What is it going to take? Somebody gets shot and dies this time around? It's become unacceptable to us in a lot of the other areas out here that your code enforcement has no teeth. It's useless without somebody to come out there and say, no more, we've had enough. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
My name is Wynn Carey, and I'm from Spring Valley. We had a meeting last week of residents, property owners that were concerned. And one lady comes with pictures where her children are down in the playground playing in the creek, and the cannabis people have got a guard to keep people from going in the creek so they can get water. And the guard comes after her children in a 4-wheeler, laughing because he's scaring them and chasing them out of the creek. It's public property. We pay taxes on that property. They don't pay taxes on that property. And would like to get together and do a communication to all 900 property owners in English and Spanish, and I would like to ask the board if we can do it on Lake County letterhead, and we will print them. We'll put them in the envelopes. Special districts will give us the mailing labels, and will the county mail them for us? Thank you.
And as far as to those questions, that is not the specific topic at this moment in time. I would suggest that we have that as a separate conversation, just to make sure that we stay within the topic that's been publicized to the public of what we would discuss here today. But thank you for your comment. Any further comments from the Zoom room? All right, and bringing it back to the board.
Just one comment on some of the last public comment here is obviously we understand the frustration, and we got work to do, so clearly hear you. But I also want to say that, you know, if someone is pulling a gun out and threatening folks and doing those things, that's illegal. I don't, I'm confused if the sheriff is called because someone was threatened with a gun and there was no response. Was there a response?
We're too far away. Did somebody get murdered? We'll come.
So you're saying that was the answer that was given?
You need a witness. If it's just you, there's nothing they can do.
Okay. Because obviously code enforcement would not deal with issues like that. That is a law enforcement issue.
Yeah, that's exactly, when we talked in the last meeting we had out in Spring Valley with Andy came and talked with them, and that was the same sentiment. He can put tags on anything, but if they can't get the resources from the sheriff's department because they're short-staffed, then it sits idly, and that's where these folks get emboldened out there. And that's also another reason why we were thinking about this group, was this ad hoc group, was also to attack the low-bearing fruit, if that makes any sense, like the water meters that we're talking about, and the fences that have no properties on it, those type of things. But then, like I explained before as well, it still goes back to needing the resources of the law enforcement. So that's where, you know, it gets stuck.
I believe at this point, and I think it was always the same, but Prop 64 made it slightly more difficult by decriminalizing a lot of this, but no one is allowed to tear down or touch cannabis unless you are a peace officer, or at least you have to have a peace officer present when doing so. So code enforcement can't just go out to an empty lot, even if there's nobody there that would be seen as possibly a dangerous situation. They still can't cut it down without having a peace officer in the area. And I believe it's the same concept for hemp as well, because of its proximity to being cannabis. I know that was part of our discussions when we created the hemp ordinances. If somebody is found to be out of compliance, we're going to need law enforcement to be there to help cut it down. Those things definitely take their toll when we have staffing issues, which unfortunately that toll is taken on the communities that don't have the ability to solve the solutions that they have in front of them. I am willing to look at alternative ways to get to the same result. I'm open to, again, those alternative routes other than the committee, but I am still very headstrong about bringing things back to bolster our toolkit to be able to make change and make an impact. I'm concerned about time moving fast. And I get it that some people grow all year round, but I would say the far majority of them grow during the season without having to expend electricity or other things like that. Most people are just utilizing the sun in the season. But yes, there are some all year round activities that also do occur, just in my opinion, not as much.
So we have a roadmap task force this week. And I don't see why we can't add to that agenda to start coming up with some of the plans that you're contemplating that you've already discussed with Sheriff Martin. It might be a way for us to move even faster in a structure that already exists.
Okay. I'll be discussing that with our CAO, seeing if we can do that. And so we have two things on our, no, Supervisor Simon, I'm sorry.
No, I clearly understand, all of our departments, all of our agencies are short-staffed, but, when you're talking about folks being threatened with guns, when you look at a priority list for calls, that's a top priority. So I understand that, but the response needs to be there at some point or another. So I hear what you're saying on the staffing issues. I understand that completely, but you also prioritize when you're short-staffed. And, if we have a community that is constantly being threatened, with weapons and that type of violence, then those are the priority at that point. I know there's other things going on, but that clearly it's home, and I understand the staffing issues, but that needs to be prioritized.
And I think
And we're all an hour away. Spring Valley is an hour away. South of County is an hour away from Lakeport. I understand that, but if you have residents in any community that are being threatened physically and especially with a gun, then that needs to be a top priority for our law enforcement.
So we have two items here. I know there seemed to be better consensus for item A than B, and B, again, alternative routes are very much possible. But if we can look at item A, and if that's something that we want to agree with, and send that consensus back to the interim director.
Yeah, I would love to give the interim director direction that these are key priorities that we know are going on in the community, and wholeheartedly support them coming, all of them coming back with, some actions we're going to be taking here sooner than later. And whether that's through the committee or just direct action, I'm all in favor of that.
Okay. Supervisor Scott?
I definitely agree with that, but I think the public needs to know that we do not set the sheriff's priorities. So that's something we cannot hear as a board, I don't believe, tell the sheriff what his priorities need to be.
No, I'm not. I was my own personal opinion on that one.
No. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't want the public to think that we have the ability to tell the sheriff what his priorities need to be. I just wanted to make that clear. That's not up to us. That I most definitely agree with you, Supervisor Simon, that if somebody's threatening somebody with a gun, that should be a priority. But I don't have the power to tell the sheriff that should be a priority for him.
As your interim community development director, however, I will say that I've been listening to the entire conversation, and so am I correct to assume that there is consensus that that you want us to work on these priorities through the committee? I mean, basically we have two committees that are paralleling this, and so I just want to make sure I understand which one or both, because the Community Development Ad Hoc Committee is looking at community development as a whole. There's been a lot of focus initially at planning, but code enforcement and building is also a subject of that. And then as far as the roadmap task force, although the focus is different, the attendees is quite similar to what is being proposed in Part B of this agenda item. So I can certainly give direction to code enforcement staff as to the priorities, and we can continue the discussion in whichever venue you prefer.
If you're asking me, I think I was zoning in. I would agree with Supervisor Scott Paiska that the roadmap task force would be the place to start immediately.
And I believe
that's just me.
That would make 3 by my saying yes, and so that would give you the consensus. And I see Supervisor Scott and Crandall, and since it's the soonest to meet together to have those discussions, what I will do is I will meet with CAO Hutchinson to provide some convey the ideas that I have been playing around with and having conversations about so that we can elaborate a little bit better for the committee to discuss. Okay. And I think today all we needed was direction. There's no need for an actual motion. It looks like direction was heard and provided, and we will continue to keep the public updated as to what our conversations consist of and actions that they can anticipate to see, with hopes that those discussions lead to those actions. And that will do it for that item. Got to go back to the normal agenda here. Next, we have the Civic Spark Fellow presentation amendment to Chapter 23. Is it, Mayor, did I get an email that we were pulling that item?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're pulling that item. Apparently, we thought this was separate and apart from the last Civic Spark presentation made at an earlier meeting, but apparently they felt it was already covered in the last meeting, so we don't need that.
Okay. And I know that they said they would be submitting those amendments to us for review in the near future, so I expect that that's what we will see in the near future. Moving on to item 7.4A, consideration to waive the formal bidding process pursuant to Lake County Code, Section 38.2, as it is not in the public interest due to the unique nature of goods or services, and B, consideration of 10th Amendment to the agreement between the County of Lake and Cerner Corporation for Anasazi software and support services for fiscal years 2021, 21-22, and for a sum of $95,000, and authorize the board chair to sign the amendment. And Director Metcalf, there you are. How are you this afternoon?
Oh, just doing great. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm sorry that my item is not glamorous or controversial, or maybe it is, but anyway, I will try to keep it short because I know you have more things to do after this. So item 7.4, what you have before you is an amendment to a contract we have with Cerner Corporation, who actually created and operates our electronic health record system, which is used by many other behavioral services departments throughout the state, that is called Anasazi. As the board memo states, Anasazi is a highly complex and complicated system that is used mostly by our clinical staff. There are only 4 state-approved vendors from which to choose for this type of electronic record system, and none of them are here locally. In the past couple of years, we've shopped around these other vendors, and they've all either been inadequate, too expensive, or both. The good news is the California Mental Health Services Authority is currently working on an improved comprehensive electronic health record system that potentially could be up and running sometime next year. So we're hopeful to switch over to that system when it is ready to go. And I and other staff have been involved in these meetings and discussions around this, and it's quite exciting because it looks like it might be a cost savings to the state as well. I would like to point out that this amendment to this contract does cover services provided in fiscal year 2021 and for forecasted services in fiscal year 21-22 in the amount of $23,610. I'm not very good with math. And the difference being that for fiscal year 2021 would be $71,390,000. The decrease in the contract for this year is due to the fact that last fiscal year we were moving forward with Cerner's migration into the Millennium system. And some of you might remember me talking about that we were hopeful that Cerner's upgrade to the current system would be a viable and usable system for us, but after trials and tribulations and learning more about that system, we decided that it did not fully meet the needs of our department. So that explains the difference in the contract dollar amount. So that said, and I hope I haven't confused you all, but I'm asking for board approval for this contract with Cerner Corporation for fiscal years 2021 and 21-22. And I'm open to any questions. I hope, again, that was probably way too much information.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from board members? So I did ask a question to you, and I'm not sure if you were able to answer the question. I know that you were looking into it, Director Metcalf. In your attachment for the agreement, it talks about all the specific amendments, and it stops on August 28th, 2018. And when I looked up August 28th, 2018, it was only for a single fiscal year of 18-19. Did we miss 19-20 agreement?
No, you didn't miss fiscal year 1920. We were working on amending the contract for that fiscal year in fiscal year 2019-20, but Cerner did not respond to us in a timely fashion, and so that was the reason why that year you're right, there's a break in the fiscal years, and so that's why we did not contract with them in that particular year.
So we did not use Anasazi that specific year?
We did, but because they failed to respond to the contracting process, we actually denied payment of invoices for that fiscal year because they did not comply to the terms of the contract. So that's why there is no contract for that fiscal year.
Okay. And they won't be coming back to haunt us asking for whatever was missing in that year?
Well, let's hope not, because otherwise I'll be coming to this board on bended knee. But no, they were in violation of the terms of the contract, so we just denied payment of those invoices.
Okay. And then I do have a question. Not sure if you have an answer for this one. All the contracts before were in the $50,000 range. Is there a reason for the increase to $70,000?
Yeah, I'll have to get back. You know what? It's probably just because of changes because of COVID-19. I know that's been an impact to our electronic health record system because we've had to accommodate different components to how we provide services that way. So that's part of it. But if you want a more detailed list of that, I can certainly put that together for you.
No, that will do it. I think that was the gist of my questions, and thank you for letting me know why there was a gap. And I do believe that if it's possible, just so that everything is correct, at the bottom it says, except as specifically modified herein, at the bottom of the agreement. It lists all the amendments, but it does miss the August 28th, 2018. And just so that we can match what it says on top in the whereas, if we can add that just to make it complete, that would be the only amendment that I request. That makes no change other than make sure that we don't miss an amendment in our statements.
Okay, perfect. Yes, we'll make sure that happens.
All right. Any other comment before I open it up for the public? And let's go ahead and open it up to the public. Phone 6205. I know your hand has been up for a while. Is this regarding this item of 7.4?
Hello, this is Bart Levins, and yes, I tried to comment several times today and wasn't recognized, and I'm afraid you're past the item I was trying to comment on. But what I wanted to bring to attention is that there were two recent interviews of Sheriff Martin on KPFC radio in which he said in both interviews that due to short staffing that he was pulling enforcement from cannabis. I wonder if there is a disconnect between the Sheriff's Department and the supervisors, and if more communication could help everybody get on the same page of exactly what is the policy in the department.
And we need to stay on topic. I'm sorry that you were not able to get your hand up. Obviously, it seems that you can, since your hand is up and I was able to see it. But at this point in time, we have moved on to item number 7.4. I would suggest, so that you can be heard, if you can email us your full comment. That way we can make sure and get that and receive it. Thank you. And I see no further public in the boardroom, and so that means that's our final public comment for this item. Let's go ahead and bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the formal bidding process pursuant to Lake County Code Section 38.2 as not in the public interest due to the unique nature of goods or services.
Second.
I think he wasn't done with his
Yeah, I
motion
was just
quite
reading,
yet.
sorry about that long day. And approve the 10th Amendment to the agreement between the County of Lake and the Cerner Corporation and Anazi Software, or Anazi Software and Support Services for fiscal years 2020 and 2021. And authorize...
And 21 and 22.
Oh, and 21 and 22 for a sum of $95,000, and authorize the board chair to sign the amendment.
Second.
We have a motion from Supervisor Simon and a second from Supervisor Scott. If we can please get a roll call, Johanna.
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall,
Aye.
Supervisor Scott,
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska,
Yes.
and Supervisor Sabatier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go over item 7.1, Supervisor's weekly calendars. Let's start in the back end. Supervisor Pyska.
I'm off
There she
mute
is.
now. Okay. This evening, there is an emergency Cobb Area Council meeting where they will be discussing whether or not to move forward with the Blackberry Cobbler Festival. So I plan to participate in that, or at least listen in at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow afternoon, there is a meeting with Senator McGuire. Thursday.
Supervisor, that meeting is being rescheduled.
Oh.
Senator McGuire meeting will not happen tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, good to know. I'll just tweet that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Thursday is the Roadmap Task Force, which I'm looking forward to digging into what we decided today. The Side Street Market in Kelseyville is also happening that evening at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. It's a really great event if anyone's interested in doing that. Friday, I am going to be catching up on a lot of things. And that Sunday is the Fiddler's Jam at Eli Stage Stop. And Tuesday, we have, I potentially am touring somebody around in the morning. It looks like we have a special board meeting in the afternoon, and then getting caught up with the agenda that day, and then Tuesday back here. That's it.
Thank you very much. And let's go to Supervisor Scott.
This week, my calendar is full of meetings with Blue Zone, and we also have the Wellville National Team that's here looking at Lake County. They're going to be coming back hopefully in the springtime, bringing 5 different communities to Lake County and having their big event here. So I'll be meeting with them most of the week. And then Friday, leaving to take my daughter back to college, and then 2 o'clock meeting on Monday. That is it for me.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Crandall.
Yes, so yesterday we attended, I think Supervisor Sabatier was on as well, the AB 52 training that was conducted by the Habemetalo Cultural Monitor Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and it was very informative. And I know I talked with Mr. Bosch about ensuring in his recommendations to get our planners to eventually take trainings as such. I'm sure some of them were there as well. Very helpful. Of course, tomorrow I have a meeting with the sheriff and the flock group. Thursday I have I think I'll be here at the office Thursday. Friday, we have the YOLO meeting, 2x2. Middle Creek Restoration meeting, Monday?
I would suspect so.
Yeah, I think so. And I know following that, we'll have the special meeting at 2 p.m., right? Yeah. Is that when, that's when it is?
Yes.
Yep. And then, then back here Tuesday as well.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Simon?
Yeah, so just a couple of meetings I didn't report on last week. We had a community development meeting with the committee on Monday. Also had a tour of the date with Russ Kramer, the Davis Street, I think it's called, the vegetation abatement project up there, the 400-foot break, which was great to get eyes on that, and what a great project. And I know there's more work to be done there from Clerk and Cal Fire and everybody who worked on that with the city, everybody. So it was a great project to look at, and hopefully we'll be seeing more of those around the county. And I know stuff's happening, but that was just a nice one to go out and take a tour of. Obviously, today's meeting. On Wednesday, I did want to ask Carol, do we have a EDTF meeting on the 28th? On there, Carol?
I don't
Just a second, Supervisor, I'm looking at that.
see one. Was
No, we
canceled.
do not.
Okay, mine, yeah, I wasn't sure because it did say canceled. And then Thursday, I don't have anything right now. Friday had a reschedule, so we have a special meeting too on Friday? Potentially? What are you guys talking about?
Monday.
Monday.
And then
Didn't have it.
possibly next Thursday, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I thought, so. Also have the CCR subcommittee meeting on Friday, the 30th, in the afternoon. On the 31st, I got a CPR class I got to be taking. And then Monday, and the special meeting is at 2 p.m. on Monday?
Yes.
Okay. And then back here on Tuesday. That's not on mine.
We'll make
Oh,
sure.
it's the second. All right, now I know why. I accepted it in the email from her and it didn't click over.
We'll make sure you're there.
Yeah, yeah, I got that. I just don't know why it's not on here.
All right. I believe that our agenda review that was slated for today will probably be moved over to tomorrow. On the Wednesday, the 28th, I am going to meet one-on-one with the Blue Zones Committee and then take part of some of the Blue Zones workshops that are occurring during the day. Later on in the afternoon, I'll be joining in the Lake County Fire Protection District just to keep track and follow what their activities are. On Thursday, the Roadmap Task Force and CSAC. And then on Friday, I think we're going, aren't we going all the way down to Cache Creek Casino or something like that?
It's Hills. It's their...
Yeah, Sika Hill Olive Mill.
Olive Mill, yeah.
That's where we will be meeting with the Yolo County Flood Control. I think this is a good first step in building a new relationship with Yolo County Flood Control, who does have control of some of the activities with our water, especially Cache Creek and the lake itself. Then I'm not quite sure what this is. Okay, no, that's different. And then hopefully I'll be back in time so that we can go to the sheriff swearing-in ceremony, which will happen here in the board chambers at 4 p.m.
Oh, I thought that was August 30th.
Yeah, it's all, unless I got it wrong, but want to make sure that we can be here if possible, depending on how long that meeting lasts. And then on the second, Middle Creek Restoration Project, and then we will have a special meeting starting at 2 o'clock, and if I'm out in time, another CSAC phone call update. And then back here again for our Tuesday meeting. I do want to say that the Davis Street project that did occur is somewhat perfect to align with the Snow Mountain, Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument Trail Park, our trail plan that they are working on right now. One of the ideas is to connect Davis Street directly to the Cache Creek Wilderness and the National Monument. And I know that there's a lot of conversations about connecting in many other ways. I think that National Monument is somewhat of a hidden gem in our community. I know that we have signs going up, still working with BLM to get some kiosks out in some of our parks and some of our visitor centers or stores. We need to really highlight that we have such a magnificent preserved area in our community. Goes all the way from the northeast all the way to the south of the county and into Napa County. And it's just something that I think that we really can capitalize on, and I'm hoping that we can keep those conversations going. And that's pretty much my last update on the happenings of last week.
I think we're going to have to clarify because it says next Friday, 8:30, August 30th at 4 p.m., but it says next Friday and it was sent last week, so
we will have to clarify that. Thank you very much for that. Is there anything else that I missed, board members, before we close up and go to closed session? All right, so we will be going to closed session. We have 3 items. 8.1, conference with legal counsel, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to government code, section 54956.9D2E1, one potential case. 8.2, sitting as the board of directors of the Lake County IHSS Public Authority, conference with A, Chief Negotiator M. Long and County Negotiator C. Marketan, and B, Employee Organization, California United Home Care Workers Union Local 4034. 8.3, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to government code section 54956.9D1, settling States versus Mckesson, I think I said that right, Cardinal Health and Amerisource Bergen Distributors and Manufacturer Janssen Pharmaceuticals Inc., Johnson & Johnson et al. And with that, if I didn't miss anything, we will adjourn to closed session. Thank you for joining us in our open session today. And shut up. You will be sending us a Zoom link?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll see everybody in Zoom for closed session. Sam didn't waste a minute. He just cut me off.